we're starting with Miami because they are the clear-cut best team in the ACC. So I'm asking the question, is it Miami in the field in the ACC? To give you the short answer, yes, it is. They have the seventh best odds to win the national championship at plus 1,100. That is according to DraftKings. The next closest team, if you're just looking in terms of preseason odds, it's SMU at plus 10,000. So clearly, once you get to Miami and then you get to the next team, there is a significant drop off. Kind of like we talked about last week with the Big 12. If you're looking at the Big 12 as a whole and you look at tier one, right, you think of Texas Tech and then you have BYU in there, but they're under Texas Tech, kind of how it was last year. And then you kind of have a jumbled mess throughout the rest of the Big 12. Not calling the Big 12 a mess because I love the Big 12. I love watching the Big 12. But it's really anybody's game once you get past Texas Tech and once you get past BYU. Well, at least from a 50,000-foot view, looking at the ACC before the season even gets started, it's July, still have a lot of time before training camp opens for teams, before they get back on campus and start practicing and things like that. At least as of right now, it appears to be Miami and then everybody else. There are some teams, though, that I think could contend for a conference championship, but I don't really see going too far beyond that. Right now, it's just Miami. Right now, it is just the Miami Hurricanes, and for obvious reasons, right? They return one of the best wide receivers in the country in Malachi Toney. They return one of the best running backs, a 1,000-yard rusher last year in Mark Fletcher. They got an upgrade at quarterback. And he comes by the name of Darian Mensah, came over from Duke. He was second in the country last year in passing yards with just under 4,000 total. He accounted for 34 passing touchdowns, which also ranked second in the country. Only had 6 interceptions. Didn't turn the ball over a whole lot. Completed about 67% of his passes. If you look at any of the early mock drafts, which to be honest, I do not pay a lot of attention to this time of year, Darian Mensah is projected to be a first-round quarterback. So, and yes, there are reports, as I'm seeing in the comment section here, there are reports of what he's getting paid, and it's around the $6.5 million range. I believe that's a separate conversation. That is a lot of money. I don't know if we've seen a quarterback getting paid that much, but that is what reported what Darian Mensah is getting paid. So he's getting paid a lot of money. He gets to be the starting quarterback for Miami, taking over for Carson Beck. So just comparing the numbers between Carson Beck and Darian Mensah, Carson Beck threw for about 3,800 yards last year. So kind of similar to Darian Mensah, accounted for 30 touchdowns, but he doubled Darian Mensah's interception total. Carson Beck threw 12 interceptions last year. Darian Mensah only threw 6. Carson Beck did complete about 72.5% of his passes, so that is significantly higher than what Darian Mensah was able to accomplish. But here's the difference between the two quarterbacks, at least in my mind. When you watched Miami last year, the formula was pretty simple, right? They were going to run the football, and they were going to play really good defense, and then Carson Beck would take the throws that were there, right? Check down if need be, hit the open man, right? And he did have some great plays last year, but it wasn't anything spectacular really throughout the year. With Darian Mensah, I believe you're getting a lot more at quarterback, at least from a passing standpoint. He's not the best runner out there, but I believe he's a significant upgrade in the passing game. I believe he's a significant upgrade at quarterback, and that's really going to help Miami. 2 years ago, Miami had one of the best quarterbacks in the country, a guy that we talk about a lot, given that we are a Nashville sports talk radio station. We talk about Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans. Well, 2 years ago, Cam Ward was the starter at Miami, and they had one of the most prolific offenses in college football that year. The problem was on defense, they couldn't stop Molasses in December. I'm going to get to their defensive numbers in just a second because I promise you those numbers are staggering and they're going to shock a lot of you. But they do upgrade at quarterback. So that's really going to help Miami, and they already have the good defense. So I expect Miami, if you look at, I don't know what preview magazines you guys might read. Personally, one of the ones that I'm reading, I think had Miami as a preseason top 10 team at number 7. I'd say that's probably fair. Now, I'm going to release my preseason poll probably about the midway point of August. And early returns are that I will have Miami a little bit higher than number 7, but we will get to that once August rolls around. Not only did Miami add Darian Mensah from Duke, but they also added his leading receiver in Cooper Barkate. They brought him in to Coral Gables. This is a guy that had 72 receptions, over 1,100 yards, which ranked 9th in the country. He had 7 touchdowns, averaged about 15 and a half yards per catch. They brought in the number 1 offensive tackle, a 5-star. Some services, I believe, had him as high as the number 1 recruit in the country. Well, yep, he went to Miami. He's wanting to play for Mario Cristobal. Makes sense given that he is an offensive lineman and Mario Cristobal is an offensive line guy. That is a 5-star Jackson Cantwell. So he's going to be in charge of protecting Darian Mensah's blind side. And look, Miami has always been a good recruiter in high school. This year, they bring in a top 10 recruiting class, number 8 in the country. So this is where things start to really get interesting. When you're looking at the other side of the ball, we just spend a lot of the time talking about the offense, right? Let's flip over to the defensive side. So in 2024, defense was Miami's Achilles heel. They gave up over 25 points per game. They gave up over 327 yards per game. And they gave up 30 or more points 5 different times throughout that year. Now, if you remember, the record was pretty good. They finished 10-2 in the regular season. They ended up losing the Pop-Tarts Bowl to Iowa State. That was the game in which it was a shootout. Cam Ward played the entirety of the first half. He sat out the second half in preparation for the NFL draft. So Miami finished 10-3 that year. You rewind the clock a little closer to where we are now in 2025. Here's what Miami's defense did. They were a top 5 defense in terms of points allowed per game at under 15. They were a top 12 defense in terms of yards given up per game at under 300, 294 to be exact. And they never gave up 30 points in a game at any time this year. The most points they gave up this year, 27 in the CFP semifinals to Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl. So they went from giving up 30 or more points 5 times in 2024 to not giving up 30 at all in 2025. The reason for that? The switch at defensive coordinator. They fired Lance Guidry in 2024. They brought in a guy by the name of Corey Heatherman from Minnesota, who I thought it was a slam dunk hire when they brought in Corey Heatherman because Minnesota had a really good defense when he was there. Doing what he did in 1 year in South Beach should not be possible. Taking a team that was in the bottom half of the country in terms of defense and turning that into a strength in 1 year, basically overnight, should not be possible. But Corey Heatherman was able to do that. He returns at defensive coordinator. Now, if you look at Mario Cristobal's history of when he got to Miami in 2022, we'll go record by record here. In 2022, they went 5-7, did not make a bowl game. 2023, they went 7-6. 2024 jumped up to double-digit wins. That was the 10-3 season that I was talking about. And then last year, they got 13 wins. 13-3 was the final record there. They made the national championship game. Not only did they make the national championship game, but they were actually at the 50-yard line with a chance to win the game in the final minutes versus Indiana. They were this close to winning a national championship game, but as most of you remember, Carson Beck threw an interception, and that's how Miami seasons ended. So you just see Miami do this under Mario Cristobal, right? Going from 5 wins to 7 wins to 10 wins to 13 wins. And if you're asking me if I think Miami is going to be better or worse than they were last year, look, you see that 13-3 record that they accomplished last year, and I'm here to tell you that I think they're going to be a better team than they were last year. And that's a team that had 13 wins, so that's a pretty crazy thing to say. but I truly believe that they upgraded at all the right spots. Offensive line's not going to be a problem, even though they do have some attrition within that unit due to the NFL draft. There was some attrition on the defensive side of the ball. I get all that, but I trust Corey Heatherman. I trust Mario Cristobal to be able to develop the offensive line. They upgraded at quarterback. They brought in more weapons to pair with Malachi Tony and Mark Fletcher, including what I believe to be maybe a top 10 receiver in the game right now, and Cooper Barkay. So I believe Miami is going to be a better team in 2026 than they were in 2025. And they had 13 wins. Pretty crazy times we're living in.